wait. And baby, I'm TFC till I die.
As I've said before, money doesn't necessarily buy you happiness, but those who say that didn't have their club owners buy them a Federico Bernardeschi and a Lorenzo Insigne. Welcome to this week's episode of Toronto Till I Die. Your hosts, Mike Newell. Jeffrey P. Nesker is back in the saddle. And Mike Zink is away this week, but we do have an amazing substitute appearance by Chris Fung from Waking the Red joining us this week. Gents, how you doing? How was your weekend? Basking in that 2-0 away win glow.
Good weekend. I mean, we're both Arsenal fans, so our Saturday was pretty exceptional, Mike. Thanks for asking. Looking forward to trying not to get too disenfranchised by the insane amount of people that are going to be at BMO for both games this coming week with the CNE and all of that stuff. How you doing, buddy?
Yeah, I'm good. Weekend was great. Obviously, a 2-0 win is great. I mean, look, Man United also won, which is nice, but there's still a tire fire. They're about to pay £100 million for another winger, so great. But I was funny enough, at the CNE and by Bellwether Stage on Friday. I saw Metric and Interpol live.
Nice.
That was just fantastic night. Great views of both the stadium and the CNE. But yes, I do also agree with you. Wednesday and Sunday are going to be a madhouse trying to get in and out of that space. But Chris, how was your weekend? What did you get up to other than seeing your team go top of the table in a 2-0 away win?
I've actually got to confess, so I'm a bit behind on some of the games. I caught up on the TFC game. On Saturday, I was getting married, so that...
Congratulations!
Welcome to the club, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you. And so I'm getting caught up on Arsenal. I actually didn't know the result, but I kind of heard they won. Everyone spoiled it.
Because I feel like, we should probably say spoiler first.
It's totally all right. But I'm doing fantastic. It's an honor and privilege to be on the show, and thank you so much. So
yes,
very excited to be here with you two esteemed gentlemen. And I had a fantastic weekend, no complaints whatsoever.
Awesome.
Well, I mean, you can't, or your now spouse is going to track you down. Speaking of Chris, just to give him a little introduction, he's one of the new blood at WTR. And despite the fact that he doesn't want to take my idea for what to call his analysis column or his Twitter handle, he is bringing the heat at WTR in the grand tradition of the Ollie Platts and the Charlie O'Connor Clarks. He's become the trusted voice on tactics, and you're in for a treat today because he's written some really, really, really in-depth pieces on how TFC's playing, with sort of bringing it into the wider perspective of soccer tactics. And we're going to have a great time picking his brain today. And I encourage everybody in the chat to bring the questions. But let's get moving, Mike, because I know you've also got a rundown before we see the floor.
Absolutely. And gents, let's just jump right into it. Obviously, we talked a little bit about this on the Tunnel Club, but a 2-0 away win at Charlotte. Look, a team that you got to catch, a team that you can now put behind you a little bit. And look, the first half, not much to talk about there. A little bit of a snoozer. In terms of, and look, I think we talked about it, just the idea that a weather delay can sometimes do that to teams when you're ready to go.
I was about to mention,
Yeah, and then all of a sudden you have to wait an hour and a bit and then play both teams. But man, those adjustments at halftime really made a difference for Toronto FC. I wanted to throw it to you guys just in terms of, before we sort of get into the individual bits there on the runaround, I just want to get your general impressions on those changes that Bob Bradley made and sort of what you saw in terms of an encouraging away performance from TFC.
Go ahead, Chris.
I think one of the big things that I noticed that was encouraging was he did move Lorenzo to the middle. So he did play a bit of that number 10 role, which was excellent. What we saw was a bit of a midfield imbalance. We had Bradley at the back with Kerr and Nelson as 8s. So it wasn't quite coming off. Neither one of them were like awful by any means, but I think you did lose a bit of that ball progression. Both of them are more wingers that kind of carry the ball forward, but they're not as kind of present with their progressive passing, knowing how to really disrupt with the press. So there's a couple, like some things in there that I'm sure we'll get to a bit later, but that one switch to kind of get Lorenzo more central, huge. Yeah. But like otherwise, it was a good game. Like there's still a heavy reliance on Italians, as we saw. Like some amazing moments that I'm sure we'll get to. I don't want to get too much into the segment, but some fantastic moments. And then I think the other thing is defensively, there's a couple things that I noticed that we'll probably get into that, we might want to watch out for in future matches, that if you've got that keen eye, you probably, as a coach, you'll see some weaknesses back there that we might need to shore up.
Absolutely. Love it. I got to apologize to Robert Sarah. I was trying to pin your comment, and I actually blocked you for 5 minutes. So I'm very, very sorry about that. But I'm a little bit out of practice. First things first. I don't know if you caught it, but Berna and Lorenzo are on the team of the week for week 27 for MLS. So congratulations all around. My second note is, I guess Columbus is the new NYCFC because we seem to have our way with them, and we're their bogey team with we're their bogey team with our new Italians. And speaking of the new Italians, I wanted to thank you, Mike, for doing what we all need to do, which is sort of raise our hat and take some licks for being so anti our perspective on moments of individual brilliance earlier in the season. We didn't want them, and now all of a sudden we're A-okay with them because they're super bangers,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, Chris, you mentioned the idea of, imbalance in the team and in that midfield, and in a lot of ways the reliance on the DPs is, in a normal time, you kind of be like, oh, this is a little concerning, but sometimes it's actually nice to sit back and enjoy the nice things that you get. When Daddy Warbucks buys you the new toys, you can kind of sometimes just sit back and enjoy the quality. And look, both goals were quality, right? And the first goal, they've been trying that sort of set play for quite some time, at least since they've both come in, where Bernardeschi is trying to swing in that to the far post, and Insigne peels off the shoulder of the back defender and either tries to head it back in towards goal or try to take a strike himself. And this time it worked out because I forgot if it was Jalen Lindsay at the back post that he just peeled away from essentially and ghosted into a little bit of space. And a lot of people were talking about connection and the fact that it wasn't a clean connection, and in fact, in a lot of ways, it was a clean connection in the way that he wanted to hit that into the ground. Right, the way to beat that goalkeeper at that point was to hit it into the ground and cause that moment of confusion, that moment of like freeze him for a second before he can actually make the move. And I thought it was a fantastically taken goal and a well-worked set piece. I mean, I don't think you want to go to that well too many times because I don't think Lorenzo Insigne is necessarily going to be winning a lot of those back post headers and back post challenges with defenders once they start getting wise to it. But a well-taken set piece goal, which, again, this team has not been great at this year in terms of set pieces.
Absolutely. And then to just fast forward to Berna's goal or Feda's goal, I mean, you encapsulated it so well on the Tunnel Club. I mean, that's what we loved about Arjen Robben, right? Was that it's, you know exactly what he's going to try and do, and you maybe can't stop him. But like you said a minute ago, the clock is running on when these moves get figured out by the rest of the league, and then they're going to have to adapt. But like you said, let's enjoy our nice new toys while they sort of run roughshod over other teams' defenses.
Well, here's the thing, like you mentioned Arjen Robben, and I mentioned this in the Tunnel Club yesterday or the other day. Sorry. Just because you know what he's going to do doesn't mean you could stop it.
Exactly.
Like just because he wants to cut in on that left foot almost every single time doesn't mean you're going to be able to have the pace or be able to have the defensive nous to stop what he's trying to do. Mm-hmm. And of course, with Richie Laryea there, you always have that threat that he'll slip Richie in behind. And we know, and we have seen that Richie Laryea will take that to the byline, will take it into the penalty box, and either he's getting a good cross away or you're going to foul him and you're going to give away a penalty. So from that perspective, there's going to be a bit of that cautiousness around Bernardeschi because, of course, defenders are going to want to snap in and try to stop him getting a shot off with that left foot or getting a cross in. But that chance that he could reverse that ball back to Richie Laryea is always there. And therefore, they're going to have to play him a bit honestly. And that's why Richie is so important. I know we're not really getting into another Richie love fest here, but
I'm more than willing.
Anytime, I'm more than willing too.
Yeah.
But I mean, Chris, I'd love to get your thoughts sort of just on that idea of, yes, we know what these DPs want to do, but one, they've got the quality, and two, there's now pieces around that can kind of mitigate teams trying to load up a little bit on.
Great point, Mike. So I think it's interesting because not often do you have two wingers that both like to cut in on their preferred feet. Sometimes you like to have a bit of a balance where you've got one that likes to cut in, one that plays a bit more to the outside, or one that cuts in but immediately makes a pass and maybe kind of makes another run that kind of overlaps his fullback.
For sure.
You have a bit more variety sometimes in the way that your wingers set up, but in the way that MLS is, they like to kind of force us into certain positions with their DP rules. So we're left in a situation where we have two wingers that like to cut inside a lot. And there's nothing wrong with that. As you just said, is those overlapping runs are very key. And in certain instances, you can actually cut in a bit, but then cut back in outside. So we haven't quite seen that as much from either of our wingers. They tend to kind of drift in a lot more. But over time, you can get those overlapping and underlapping runs, which become quite frequent in many of the top teams. I also did notice that Berna in the last match didn't use Richie on those overlapping runs as much against Charlotte. And I think a big piece of that is actually not having Osorio in the team. So when you have Osorio there, there's another third person with that interplay between the three of them where you get those moving passing triangles that you really don't see as much of, especially with Mac out of the lineup as well on that right side to balance things out. So
absolutely.
Really, to answer your question, nothing wrong with it. I think a transformational coach over time will allow players to do that because it's what they're good at. Why force them to do something else? But then the secondary part is if you have a system that's going to be good enough to generate chances, you're not going to rely on them as heavily as you are right now.
And I wonder, just a quick side note, just in regards to sort of those passing triangles that you were talking about, obviously on that sort of right-handed side, you're going to have Berna and Richie, and generally Osorio likes to drift out to that right-hand side. But on the left, we're starting to see that a little bit with Lorenzo Insigne, obviously Criscito, who we're going to talk about in a second, and now Jaden Nelson. Now, obviously, Jaden isn't the progressive passing sort of player that Mac is, but you're seeing these small incremental improvements in Jaden when he's playing in that role. And I'm wondering what you're seeing in terms of sort of that, the things that we have been kind of harsh on with Jaden this season, decision-making, knowing when to drop the ball off and when to make runs into space, basically being more effective without the ball. What are you seeing in those moments in terms of those passing triangles on that left-hand side?
So quickly, I'm just going to apologize for my cat. If anyone else in the audience,
I haven't heard the meowing, but no worries.
All good.
She's there. Okay, so for it's a great point. I've seen tremendous growth in Jaden's game, and it's a lot of the little things that a lot of people might not be noticing. Is he perfect? Hell no. Like, there's a lot of things he can improve on. I actually find when he's in tight pockets of space, he actually combines extremely well with Insigne and Criscito on that left-hand side. So if it's a quick movement where he runs and does a one-touch pass, great. As soon as he's given a lot more space and time to think, that's where he can run into some trouble and try to do too much. So one of the things that TFC lacked before the Italians came was that ability to quickly receive a ball, know exactly, like you do a quick scan of who's behind you and quickly turn upfield. Jaden's great at that. He is very, very good at understanding that there's no one on him. He can quickly turn the ball and turn your transitional kind of building out phase directly into attack. What he then struggles with is after he's made that move, he tries to go through two or three people. And that's when the defense collapses in on him and strips him of the ball, or he makes a bad pass. So if he can kind of work on those aspects of his game, you're seeing that Insigne and Criscito don't just bypass him on every single play. They actually try to involve him a bit more in the interplay. So I think as he improves, we're going to see a bit more of that, but it's that decision-making when he has a bit more time and space. That's the next step for Jaden Nelson.
Yeah, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't that like sort of the standard with players that are prodigies and excel at the youth level, is that they can do that, and so their sort of default setting is to try that, but unfortunately they're at a level where they're not going to get away with it. They're going to be held honest, and Jaden needs to get it out of his system.
I think you're absolutely right, Jeff. Like, you've hit the nail on the head. But I think what he does with that information and how he decides to take that next leap is kind of where we need to see the improvement. Otherwise, he's always going to be what he is now. So if he can't take that information and progress, then he'll just be stuck exactly as the player he is now. But we've seen him make improvements already. So who's to say he can't make those improvements there?
And that's
who's to say, yeah.
And that's where I was going to come in. Sort of like, we have seen him progress this year. He's 19 years old, right? This is really the first time that he is getting significant extended runs into the team. Like, we've seen him before at the senior level, but it's been little spurts here and there, right? Little nuggets, little tastes here and there. Now he's getting an extended run in the team, and I think he will take that and grow into 2023. Now, of course, things can happen in the offseason. There has been interest from Europe. I don't know if he's really ready for that step yet, but you know, if he is back in 2023, you know, I think they found a piece that can be a really good sort of role player to come off the bench or spot start for Mac in those moments where either he needs a break or, you know, you need something a little bit different, because his first step on the ball might be the fastest in MLS. Like, when he can get the ball and get his first step away, he can ghost by just about any defender in the league or any midfielder in the league. And that is something that a lot of teams in MLS do not have.
And do you mind if I jump in?
No, go for it.
No, please.
I think what you're saying is exactly correct, Mike. Like, you've captured, you and Jeff, kind of the Jaden situation perfectly. When I did some analysis earlier on just for Federico Bernardeschi's like progressive carries and passes, looking at his stats throughout the years, it's quite interesting. Obviously, MLS isn't comparable to Serie A, but Jaden Nelson ranks very, very highly on progressive dribbles, which kind of speaks to exactly what you're saying, is his ability to just take the ball and dribble it through in a progressive way of like more than 10 yards up the field is pretty exceptional. He was like over 95th percentile against his peers in the MLS at the same position. Second thing, Jaden Nelson's not a central midfielder. So it's central midfield is potentially like the hardest position to learn, like outfield position on the field. And Jaden Nelson's kind of adapted quicker than I thought. I was frustrated with him at the beginning, but I've seen incremental growth, and that only bodes well for him in the future, as like maybe his role isn't out on the wing. Maybe he is going to be a central midfielder, and that's even better for us.
Well, remember, Bob Bradley has a history of taking these wingers and making them into really good central midfielders. I'm now forgetting the name of the player from who was at Sporting Kansas City, brought into LAFC, and made him into not quite an MLS all-star, but made him into a really good sort of progressive ball-carrying midfielder. And now his name is slipping my mind.
We'll just call him Player X. I
can visualize him, and I can't remember his name right now. It will pop into me like the third segment.
Well, here okay, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Finish your thought. No, there's a lot of people in the comments that are talking about, Jaden Nelson can do well at a mid-table Super League Eredivisie club, and then counter, he's here to stay as a great tool in the box off the bench. Let's play Jaden's agent. Is it too early for him to go to Europe at 19 right now?
Depends on what agent you got. If you want agent who wants fees and wants him to move and get paid, then you may be looking at a move to Europe.
That's a bad agent, though.
Well, is it, though?
Yeah.
Right? Because an agent's job is to maximize value for their client, right? And if maximizing that value means going to Europe, then you go to Europe. That said, my opinion is that he should stay in MLS for a couple more years. I think we're seeing the migration of young MLS players go over to Europe and kind of not completely fail, but struggle to get out. I mean, like, everybody's looking for the next Alphonso Davies. Well, Alphonso Davies is a unicorn for a reason, right? Yeah. Not all of these guys are going to go off and become stars right away. It will take them time, and they will make mistakes. And the one thing about Europe is when you go there and you don't quite hit the ground running, you can be left in the pecking order real quick, and you can be forgotten about and shipped around. And the next thing you know, it's a couple of years later and you haven't really progressed as a player and you're back in MLS now, kind of almost at the starting blocks. So I actually think it would benefit Jaden to stay in MLS, continue to develop under Bob Bradley. You're learning with Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi and Domenico Criscito on your side potentially of the pitch. To me, it's like, are you really going to go to Belgium and get better? I don't know. That's how I see it.
That's fair. Everybody wants to talk about the Criscito nutmeg. Do we have anything to say about it besides how filthy it was?
No, just fire. Just like, I saw it and when you see something really good and you let out an involuntary, like that's what I did. I let out an involuntary, as it happened, because it was just, it's not just that it was a nutmeg. It was the casual filth of the way he did it, because he set him up for it. You could see him set him up for it. And he just, as soon as he opened up his legs, like, bye. Like, and it was, and again, like, we know these guys are quality. We know they're top level players. But to see it in MLS is still a rarity for the most part, right? You don't see that much skill check in that kind of way in MLS. And just to see that from a guy who, and again, I've thrown my hands up on this show. I was doubting whether or not it made sense to sign a 35-year-old left back. But hey, he has absolutely proven me wrong. And I am more than happy to be wrong about his performances, because he has been an 8 out of 10 just about every week that he has played for TFC.
100%. What about you, Chris? What do you think of that mag?
The nutmeg was incredible. I think I actually, in order to get caught up of the game this morning, I woke up at 6. So I was just in bed kind of watching the replay. And I think I woke up my now well. It was just like I did a like whoa, like did you you could see him kind of progressing one way, and he watched the defender kind of close him down, and he just knew, like he barely even looked, and he just kind of slid it kind of back foot through his legs and went around him. It was that was probably my favorite moment of the game, even though it didn't lead directly to a goal. It almost did.
Well, it almost did. That's the crazy part, right? Because in the end, he ends up getting by the defender once he nutmegs him anyway, wins the ball back, and then puts in a fantastic cross that
just beautiful
that Berna almost puts into the corner. Though some people said the camera angle was a little weird and looked like it was going to probably. I thought it might hit the post. I didn't actually think it was going to go in. But of course, Fuchs cleared it, so it doesn't really matter. But the fact that he can do that and then put in that kind of ball, I mean, value signing in terms of being able to get that essentially as a throw-in for the Lorenzo Insigne deal.
He's just been incredible. Like for me, I think you said 8 out of 10 on most days. I think he's actually been, and I might get flamed for this, but I think he's actually been our best signing in terms of consistency.
Wow.
Consistency, not in terms of
an argument there. That's a fair argument.
Like, I don't find myself as frustrated with him within a game or between games. And with Insigne and Bernardeschi, you have those moments of frustration, and that's naturally because they're attacking players versus defensive players. But I think everyone should be surprised, or at least incredibly happy with what Criscito's been able to do, and it's showing the value of having a technical player from Serie A. He's got even more experience than either Insigne or Bernardeschi, and it's shown.
Sure does. I mean, Tyler agrees with you. He says Mimo may be the most underrated signing we've done in a very long time, and that's funny because that move. I mean, obviously it wasn't a goal scoring move, but I remember the exact moment where I fell in love with Victor Vasquez, and it was that free kick, that cheeky free kick under the wall when they jumped.
Columbus.
That went.
I think it was Columbus.
I mean, I was just like, this guy's amazing, and I love him forever and ever and ever. So, and people are talking about, lots of people are talking about how invested they've been in the Toronto experience, and Robbie is saying Criscito on World Wrestling Entertainment. It's not what I thought it would be live and way too long. So these boys are definitely getting into the Toronto experience, and what a game! That late clearance by Fuchs it robbed us of a goal. I think that would have been the third.
Yeah, I mean, I thought it might have hit just about the outside of the post, but it could have gone in. That could have been 3. Interesting stat that I think Luke Wildman brought up in the telecast. I think TFC has scored on just about every shot directly on goal against Charlotte.
Yeah.
Ever.
5 goals, 5 shots. Yeah.
5 shots.
I'm telling you.
Which is crazy.
We're their bogey team.
Yeah, absolutely crazy. One thing that I do want to talk about, and Chris, you kind of alluded to this earlier, was sort of this break but don't bend defending. It's still probably the weakest part of Toronto FC's game, especially in transition. When they do give the ball away or do lose the ball in the attacking third, transitionally, it still feels like anytime a team can get out and run on them, a goal could happen. Mm-hmm. But I think there has been improvement even in that, especially with Chris Mavinga getting back to better form and Lucas McNaughton finding this rich vein of form at center back. Obviously, defending is not just your center backs, but maybe it is, in terms of that sort of tactical awareness, where have TFC sort of improved on that sort of defending in transition? Where do they still need to improve? Because clearly they still need to. I mean, realistically, they could have gone down actually, I think 1-0 before Lorenzo Insigne scored the goal off the corner.
For sure. And so I think typically when I think about defense, there's kind of like different aspects of the field. So you think of like your attacking third, your middle third, and then the defensive third. So from an attacking third standpoint, what we're really missing right now is actually Mac. So when you think about teams that can actually press high up the field and win the ball back, it means that your defenders are going to spend less time defending. Because if you're able to keep the opponent pinned into their end, they're either sending a 50-50 long ball up the field, or they're giving away possession, or you're going to win the ball back really high up and your defenders at the back don't have to do anything. So that part is one piece that we've been missing. The Charlotte game, great example. Mac was able to actually lead a press going up, and I'll talk about this a bit more, I think, later when we talk about the low block. But that's one big piece that's missing. Middle third, the transitional piece, you have Jaden in there right now, Jonathan Osorio on most days, and then Bradley. One's athletic, 2 of them aren't. So your ability to actually stop transitional attacks is very limited there because you're often not able to simply run as fast and you can't catch up because the ball moves faster than any other player. So they have to be really tactically intelligent to actually know where the next pass is coming from. But you're missing Mac, who's your leading presser. He often leads the press. So I've done some analysis just to understand like how he positions himself and how Osorio and Bradley play off of him in the press. That's huge. We're missing that right now. For all that Jaden brings, defensively, he's still lacking. He runs a lot. Hard worker, covers a lot of ground. What he's missing is the tactical news to actually understand where do I need to position myself and what side of the defender do I need to be to win the ball back? Because he's often running directly at a defender. A simple change of direction, shoulder drop kind of throws him off. So middle third. Now getting to the defensive third, and please stop me at any point if I'm talking.
No, please go ahead. No. This is great.
You have better pieces at the back. So if you're looking at stability, if you're thinking about, early in the season, we had Carlos Criscito. He was talked up as this amazing defensive piece. He's a DP signing. So why didn't it work? Look at the fullbacks that were flanking him. Yeah. At any given time, it was Luca Petrazo, Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, or Kosi Thompson. A lot of them don't have actual experience playing at the MLS level or better. Or they're completely new to that role altogether. So there's no stability around you. Salcedo, Mavinga, and all these players that used to be better defenders than they were, or at least came as better defenders to us from another team or in past TFC seasons, we saw them falling apart because there's no defensive structure. Because they're trying to do the job of the fullback, trying to cover the gaps that they're vacating, but also trying to do the job of the center back. And they're getting stretched incredibly, not even positionally, if you actually look at part of their map, you probably would have seen them drifting out wide more often than not, which left
it looks like you're playing a back 3 when you're not actually playing a back 3 at times, right? It was weird to look at it in the early part of the season, and that's why I felt like the criticisms of Carlos Salcedo were a little harsh because yes, he made mistakes. Don't get me wrong, he wasn't necessarily a DP center back, in terms of what you would think a DP would be. But he was left to dry a lot of times by what was happening around him in terms of his teammates' positioning.
Yeah, 100%. What do you call it? Will Dunn is talking about because that's next up on the rundown, so we might as well get it in there. Also, the stats show that Bono doesn't collect crosses very well at all. Do you? I mean, you've got it written here. Bono bounced back. Obviously, that was a redemption game for Alexander Bono, and got the clean sheet. What are your impressions moving forward? I'm not talking about whether we can, magically heal Westberg or buy 18 goalkeepers. I'm more talking about, are we protecting Bones better now?
Yeah, I mean, yes, to a certain extent, yes, we are protecting him better. And it goes to sort of what Chris just mentioned in terms of that ability to hang on to the ball in the attacking and mid thirds, right? Like if you can hang on to the ball, less shots he needs to take, right? At one point during this season, Alex Bono had the league in saves and the leagues, I think, on shots attempted on goal. In terms of that has pretty dramatically dropped. Like I think he's now, fourth in that category. So that means that's a pretty significant drop in terms of having other goalkeepers be able to pass you at that rate. So clearly he has to face less shots, which is good. Look, we talked about it last week on the podcast. The issue with Alex Bono, I don't think, is that he is a terrible goalkeeper. I think he has these clangers in him. Every once in a while, you feel like, do you have confidence in him to not have a clanger? And right now, it doesn't feel like the answer is no. You just don't feel like you have the confidence in him to say, like, I know that if I pass the ball back to you and you will distribute it well, I am, if I'm a defender, I'm he's maybe taking on a long shot from distance. Do I feel comfortable that he is going to be able to handle this in the right way? And to me, that's a no. Statistically, I think that it might bear a little bit differently. I think statistically he's having the best technically season he's ever had from a goalkeeping perspective, but that's also because these are probably the most shots he's ever had to face in a single season. So it's kind of one half of the other, right? Like it's not all on him because obviously defensively, they're allowing a lot of clean looks too, right? It's even going back to Miami to the Miami game, right? The second goal was a collapse in team defending off a set piece, where he basically gets hung out to dry, and the goal scorer gets essentially a free run at goal. So there's that, but I mean, I think we've talked the goalkeeping situation to death. They do need to upgrade in that position next season, but for the rest of the season, I think you're riding with Bones until you either don't make the playoffs or you're going into the playoffs. And
100%,
maybe at that
100%.
point, Bob has to make a decision on whether or not he sticks with Bono. But I really don't see a situation right now where Bono's not the number one.
Oh yeah, without question. Without question. So let's get into it. Because you've got playoff push mixed up in here. And I suppose we'll discuss playoff push as we talk the burning questions of the week and the games that are coming up. But let's get into the meat and potatoes here. So your first question is, what are the stats saying? And I guess we've sort of started this, but let's cede the floor to Chris a little bit. How is TFC doing since the new signings have come in?
Okay. Do you mind if I backtrack on just like two really quick
No.
things?
Oh my God. That's what we do. That's what we do here.
Completely agreed with Mike. I think with Bones, it's you kind of got to live with the mistakes for the time being. And I know that's painful for any TFC fan to hear, but goalkeepers make mistakes. His kind of goalkeeping gaffes are probably more glaring than others, especially in a playoff push that we're making. The other problem he has, he's awful at distribution. He cannot pass the ball. And I think
the worst I've ever seen. Yeah.
And that, I think, for a modern keeper is where his shortcoming will ultimately be, is that you can be a great shot stopper, but if you're not able to play the ball at your feet, you're probably not going to last very long.
Cough, David De Gea. Cough, David De Gea. Sorry, I don't know what happened there. I had a frog in my throat. Sorry there, Mike.
The second thing I think I wanted to get to was what other improvements can we make on the defensive side. I did notice against Charlotte especially, there was a lot of passes, dangerous passes that were being played into the half spaces. So that space between the flanks, so your fullback flanks, not the middle, but right in between those two zones, is your half spaces. And there was a lot of good passes that a better attacking team would have taken advantage of and likely would have scored, which bears fruit in your next point, Jeff, which is Charlotte actually had a higher XG than we did in that game, which goes to show that XG isn't the be all end all with stats. but it does show that they were in more dangerous positions consistently throughout the game. So getting into those dangerous areas and not being able to produce, even though that they were there, shows that, it led to a higher XG, but unfortunately weren't able to convert on a lot of shots that went over. So am I confident in Bono to actually be good the rest of the year? No, because Charlotte was awful in the attacking third. I think we all saw it, is that whatever form they had in the first half carried over to the second half. We just had better DPs that lifted us with some moments of magic in the second half.
You should have scored in the second half. Like at the start of
easily.
He had a chance on goal and he put it in the side netting, which I thought had actually gone in. But
half the stadium.
Yeah, exactly. But like in terms of the reason I have this question down here in terms of just this new segment, in terms of how have TFC been doing statistically since the DPs have come in, is because we've talked about the stats before they came. The fact that defensive XG was insanely high. The fact that, possession stats on games that they end up losing, they had a level of possession, but would still lose games because they had huge amounts of turnovers in the middle third. So have some of those numbers started to change since the arrival of the DPs and Criscito and Mac, even though he's only played a couple of games, and Richie and et cetera?
So yes. So if we look at the 7 league games that the Italians have all played together, we've improved exponentially. So when you're looking at whether it's XG, possession, like we have a higher XG in our past 7 games, 5 of those games we had a higher XG, so expected goals. Possession, though, on the other hand, is interesting. We've actually had a lower possession. So we've only had greater possession than our opponents in 3 of those 7 games. So one of the caveats I do want to say with possession that's always interesting, because people are always looking at possession numbers, is that there's kind of a few things that dictate possession. So one of them, the most important thing, is your philosophical kind of coaching, like your coaching philosophy or the tactical system that you employ. Some teams can be very good without even having possession. So there are teams that are comfortable sitting back and doing very precise counters. There you go.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Possession isn't everything. Number 2, are you the road team? Because if you're on the road, you might concede possession to your opponents more frequently, just because the nature of home road splits, unless you're Man City. The third thing, and this is probably a reason why we sometimes had higher possession than other teams, despite being weaker before the Italians came, is if you have an early lead. So if you're a team that has an early lead, you're typically not going to, or at least not always going to shove it to your opponents and just kind of take the sword down their throat and just 100% dominate possession, right? You're going to be patient. You're going to kind of sit back a bit more. You don't need to chase the game as much. You're going to force the other team to actually do that. And that's what we saw with TFC earlier. Like I remember the Seattle Sounders game. We could barely pass like the halfway. Never even mind. Like we had tons of possession, but we did nothing with it because we weren't threatening. The secret was to just give us the ball and we couldn't do anything with it.
Possession without purpose, as they would say, with the beautiful alliterative. So it's fair to say that our possession stats were skewed in the first half of the season by the fact that we were chasing games, so teams just let us have the ball. It was, all the things that you just said. Now we're starting to see teams pay us a lot more respect, which is how I'm going to enter into the low block chat. And with that respect, we're starting to see them cede possession. So our possession stats are going up. I've gotten a lot of questions, and I know you guys talked about it last week while I was away. But, the low block seems to be how teams are approaching playing TFC, especially with the arrival of our new Italian superstars. The low block is anti-football. So what is the best way for us to counter it, with the obvious caveat being score first and then they've got to chase the game, right? I mean, that's the easiest way to beat the low block.
So I've had this question so many times. I've actually written articles for Arsenal, Toronto FC Now,
Amazing.
Team Canada. So all 3 of those, same thing comes up. How do you deal with the low block? It's kind of, and if I 100% knew the answer, I'd probably be a soccer coach. But
of course,
at least I've learned a lot from diving into video of teams that often face low blocks. There's a great video from, I think it's Tifo, that talks about some of the key ways. It misses some things in terms of how you can break down a low block, but it kind of highlights a bit of a summary. And I know last week's pod that you guys did talk about just quicker passing, more midfield movement. That is one of the key ways. But some of the other ways are shots from distance. We do that a lot if you're thinking about Criscito, Insigne, or Bernardeschi. Quick switches of play. We are seeing that more often. We weren't able to do that as well before, but with Insigne, Criscito, and Bernardeschi, sometimes they'll completely bypass the midfield and just swing a ball over
to each other.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But tactically, if there's a lot of defenders drifting over to your side, someone's going to be open far out. So if you can actually make that quick switch of play, you can easily transition into offense. So
I want to interject for 1 second before I forget. So some people, myself included, would look at Criscito, Bernardeschi and Insigne completely bypassing the midfield as a lack of respect or trust in the players. We've heard that often, that sort of knee-jerk reaction that like, well, look, they're just playing with each other. That means that they hate Jaden Nelson or that they don't want to play with Jonathan Osorio or Michael Bradley or whatever, the knee-jerk reaction. It's interesting what you're saying, that it may actually be more tactical than personal. And I think that that's important to harp on. Sorry for interjecting, but I want to say it louder for the people in the back, myself especially. It may have nothing to do with respect here or there. They may love Cozy Thompson, but it could just be their desire to quickly change because they're playing against a low block. That's a very interesting point.
And that's exactly it, Jeff, is that the low block is designed to congest the middle and give you the flanks. But if you're too far to the outside, your options are limited. Your actual field of vision when you receive a ball at the touchline is much more limited in terms of the options that you have opposed to the middle of the field. So what you can do is as you drift in is actually do that switch of play that seems like you're bypassing the midfield and you don't want to play with them, but it's actually strategic in some cases. I'm not saying it's always. Maybe there is a small element of I made a pass to this player earlier. We couldn't do anything with it, so I'm going to try something a bit different.
Of course.
Can't fully unpack that, but definitely there can be some strategy behind that switch of play that happens.
And I wonder, just to interject and just continue on this point really quickly, I wonder if that speaks a little bit to some of the issues we're having at the number 9 position, especially with Jesus Jimenez, because prior to, obviously, we know all his goals were scored prior to the Italians arriving, right? Where TFC didn't necessarily always have to worry about a low block. Whereas now he is in a position where he has to work with a more congested middle. And obviously what he's doing to compensate is to go wide, to try to receive the ball in different positions and connect that way. And I wonder if that speaks to his struggles and even to Ayo's struggles to a certain extent, because one of Ayo's strengths is be able to use pace and use his strength and run in behind and sort of get those opportunities. I wonder if this, figuring out a better way to involve them in this strategy, is that sort of maybe, for lack of a better term, basically leading to some of the issues that the number 9s are seeing in terms of being able to get into goal scoring position.
Absolutely. When you're in a low block, your ability to actually produce and be involved in the attack is much more limited because there's way more bodies in the middle of the field. Especially,
he's not exactly.
You just don't have space to operate with, right? I will say though that not having the proper midfield behind him, especially when Mac isn't there. So if you don't have Mac there, there's a bit of an imbalance with the midfield. So not having that proper support behind you also influences what the strikers be able to do for connections in the attack. And I think, Mike, you want to jump in?
Oh, no, I just wanted to sort of go into, because you wrote a really great article on a WTR about Mac and why
two articles.
Two, exactly. Sort of explaining why Mac in a lot of ways is sort of the best big club type signing that you can make. And I wanted to sort of just expand on that a little bit, because we haven't seen a lot of Mac now play for TFC. I think he's only played 2-3 games and has been hurt for the next 7. So what about him really is going to make this team sort of click at another level than they're already clicking at this point?
For sure. And just to finish off the last point, Jimenez is still making the wrong runs. That's the problem, is he hasn't quite learned to play with Bernardeschi and Insigne. The best examples in the Charlotte game late, when Insigne actually was passing a ball to the late runner who was joining the attack. I don't know if it was Kosi. I couldn't quite remember who it was. Or Richie. Someone was making a late run into the box, and Insigne was trying to find him. It actually hit off Jimenez's knee because he ran into the path of the other player. Right. And you could see Insigne throw up his arms in the air. Is that Jimenez still isn't making the right runs and where he needs to be. So if he can work on that and get away from some of the bad habits he developed when we were in that rough patch, I think hopefully things will even out for him. He almost did, though. He did make a good run on the Bernardeschi, kind of the back end, but I'll move away from that. Okay.
No. Let me just try and simplify here, just before you answer the Matt question. His off the ball movement needs to be better, right? And he can't be chasing the ball for possession. It's not important for Jesus to have the ball. It's important for him to be where the ball is coming to next. And I think that's the disconnect there. He's chasing possession because he wants to have the ball, which is exactly what we don't want our number 9s to be doing. And especially when playing against a low block, especially when playing with wingers of such quality as our 2 Italian superstars.
And I think that speaks sort of to what Bob Bradley has always been talking about with players, about trusting your teammates to get you in. The ball will end up in the right spots if you trust your teammates to do what they need to do. And I can kind of understand where Jesus Jimenez is. He wants a goal, right? It's been forever since he's a goal scorer. That's how goal scorers think. And they thrive and they live off being able to score goals. And when you're not scoring goals, you're going to try to find the ball to get yourself in a position to just get a goal. And he might.
I would argue that he might have scored 5 if he had just made stupid Lewandowski runs to be on the end of the delicious crosses he's getting served, as opposed to trying to play like an extra attacking midfielder. But that's just me.
Very true. But Mac.
And on Io, just because I see it coming up in the chat a lot.
It's coming up like crazy
on the end of some runs. So it's actually that if Jimenez is making those runs, he's probably converting on more of those chances, like the Jimenez 100% early in the season. Io is just not at the same level as Jesus is when they're at their best. Io's still returning from his injury. He might not be fully fit. His touch still needs work when he plays with his back to goal. So the interlinking play that you would typically get from a good number 9, that hold up play, it's not quite there all the time. So those are some things for Io to work on. But 100%. Over to Mac. So one of the biggest things is if you are thinking about the low block. So I covered, I think, 3 or 4 of the strategies so far. Crosses is another one. So crossing the ball more frequently, whether it's a cutback pass, that helps to kind of pull the low block out of position. The other one is low-driven crosses. Liverpool do this a lot. So what they'll actually do is they don't have players who are kind of your traditional target men that can head a ball in. If you have those low-driven crosses that are happening earlier from further back on the field, your quicker players can actually run onto them and just get a quick touch with their foot or their head and drive it in instead of having to out-jump a defender. So
right.
That's another classic strategy that TFC hasn't used much of, because it's a pace thing, not sure yet, or maybe it's just that they're trying to still figure themselves out. So I do think the last one is actually one that most videos don't cover, but if you can press really well, and thinking about Mac, and you can win the ball up quickly, upfield, you're able to actually catch the defense out of position when they can't get into their low block quickly. So if you're making those, getting the ball back, and you have a direct plan of attack that's very precise and quick, easy offense, instant offense. Liverpool does it to a T. Dortmund does it very well too. There's many teams that press to actually get out of the issue of a low block. That's aside from just scoring early. So really for Mac, pressing, that's probably the biggest one. Progressive passing, another big one. His ability to interplay with Insigne, Osorio, Bradley, literally anyone on the field is a big missing piece. He's the most athletic, natural central midfielder that we have. We don't have another midfield engine like him. I know Bradley does a lot of work, but naturally you don't want him running up and down the pitch like that. He can do it, but it's that ability to actually be that engine that goes up and down that we're missing with Mac. So progressive passing is another big one. So if you're thinking about threats that you have, Jaden Nelson is a progressive dribbler, different from a progressive passer. Anthony Kaye, Mac is a big progressive passer, so he's able to make some of those longer passes. Sometimes you'll see Osorio make them as well, but we don't have that balance right now. So it's easier to say Nelson's going to carry the ball or interlink, but he's not going to make that pass that stretches out the defense. On the right side, there's a bit more variety, which is why you're actually seeing Bernardeschi get a little bit more freedom, because when Osorio's playing and he also has Richie overlapping and supporting him, that dynamic of the trident it's more dynamic. On the left hand side,
it sure is
a bit. So if we're thinking about Mac, the other thing that he brings is also his defensive presence. So not only pressing, but he allows Bradley, there's an understanding already, even though they haven't played together, that if Bradley's going forward, Kaye knows to slide back and cover those gaps. Right now, there's no one to cover those gaps, especially with Mark-Anthony Kaye and Bradley aren't both playing. That's just kind of some of the things that I touched on. There is a little bit more in the article about culture fit and just having someone who's came through the academy, or at least has been in the academy in some way, being kind of like a mentor to some of the academy kids coming through. But in terms of a tactical kind of bonus, those are some of the things that Kaye will bring.
But it's fascinating. I mean, it scares the crap out of me because you can see the causality, right? Like without Mac, fans are like, well, Insigne has kind of been frustrating, and it's not necessarily Insigne's fault. Am I correct in saying that you think our midfield is our biggest issue, our biggest area of need in terms of thinking about how we are going to move forward with signings, how we're going to move forward with depth pieces and stuff like that? Like, it seems to me because Osorio's future is very much up in the air, right? And without him on the right side of this midfield trio, we need someone there that does what he can do. And then certainly we're seeing what happens when Mac isn't in the lineup. Is that something that we need to worry about, like having capable deputies for those two skill sets moving forward?
I would say goalkeeper is probably up there along with central midfield, especially if Osorio leaves. Right now we have no natural depth. And I know one of the questions earlier was, is Nelson a starting player if you're truly wanting to compete? And I don't think any of us are saying that. I think he's a reliable sub, hopefully. We hope he can become a quality sub that's reliable. So I would say central midfield, absolutely. Even if Osorio stays, we need some other depth option that we can rely on. Bradley's not getting any younger.
So, I'm not even talking about the 6. I'm just talking about our 2 8s right now. Like, oh my God, you bring in the 6 and it's like we're going to spend all our money on those 3 positions. You know what I mean?
So I was fortunate enough to actually speak with Bill at the Federico Bernardeschi presser release that he had, the celebration. And he did say that, what you're seeing now isn't the finished product. Fans often want to skip ahead. They don't want to enjoy the journey. And if any of you are NFL football fans, one of the quotes from Ray Lewis is always enjoy the journey. It's always more enjoyable than the final destination, because everything that leads you to that final destination. Hold on. What he says is that you take the journey for granted. And it's that build up that makes the championship more special, because if you're just winning it all the time, it's great. But if you don't remember those dark years that came before it, it almost reduces a bit of that feeling of joy. It's not a perfect quote, but it's that journey of getting there, right? So if you think of the team and how it's constructed right now, you actually want those pieces to kind of come together slowly and organically. If you rush in and just add a whole bunch of pieces, sometimes those pieces aren't going to fit together. Now that you have more of a base to build from, it's building that defensive depth, building that midfield depth. Who's your number one winger behind Bernardeschi and Insigne if they get injured, or if they can't go 90 minutes, right? So those are some of the things that are popping up. We're very fortunate right now that they've stayed healthy and been able to play 90 for most games. But I think we need to build that depth going forward. And if Osorio leaves, then central midfield goes to the top of the list.
Yeah, I mean, I think central midfield is at the top of the list, including a deputy for all 3 of those guys. Because it sounds to me like, our center back core are decent enough. Obviously they could be better, but not having depth pieces there, because without putting too fine a point on it, Jaden's doomed if we play against a low block unless he can figure out how not to dribble, because that's the worst thing you can do in a congested midfield is try to dribble through 18 guys. So if he doesn't get that out of his system, then he can't play as our number 8 while we're defending a low block, because he's a liability out there, or while we're attacking a low block because he's a liability out there.
Just signing N'Golo Kanté and everything's fine.
He's been on that forever and ever and ever and ever. I am trying to absorb all of this multitude of information. And Mike, what's your question? You got a question?
Mine is sort of, and you're getting into it a little bit, Chris. It's another article that you wrote was around sort of short-term sort of gratification over long-term pragmatism and long-term building. And I think on shows like ours that are fan-driven, that we hear a lot from the fan base, You know, like there is always this, why isn't it happening, and why isn't it happening right now? Like, why?
What a good
like
question.
When Jeff, when you say something like Lorenzo Insigne for some people is disappointing, it blows my mind. Does he have like 4 goals in 7 games? Like, he's, for extrapolate that over a season, he's winning an MVP. Maybe the only person is the guy playing on the other side of the field. So you know, from that perspective, I totally get that, because if people can cast their minds back to 2015 and the night that we clinched the playoff spot, the emotion of finally getting there after all these years of getting it wrong and being the screw ups, and right, like, you enjoy that journey. I guess I wonder, from that article, you know, what would sort of be the things that TFC fans should be kind of cognizant of in terms of this slower build towards what we hope will become an all-conquering juggernaut?
That's a great question.
I think with the slower build, just appreciate what you're seeing right now. Like, playoffs or not, we're getting to see some of the most talented players in the world playing for TFC right now. And I know it's a direct contradiction to like sports in general. Sports are meant to be immediate gratification for fans. I want to see a win. There's a direct outcome. Soccer's a little bit different because there's a draw, but you know, it's either a win or loss in most scenarios. And sometimes a draw, people take that as a loss. But I would say that's kind of the biggest piece, is just enjoy what you're seeing right now, playoffs or not. There was so much, not damage, but like so much that we couldn't get through, like adversity that we faced in the beginning of the season, that I think a lot of people's expectations, the worst thing that could have ever happened to Toronto FC was announcing the Insigne signing before the season started, because he wasn't joining until July. People's expectations shot through the roof. You'd hear a lot of fan comments around, this isn't a rebuild. If you sign Insigne, you're trying to win right now. But the big challenge is really thinking about, Insigne didn't come until July. We tried to get Criscito to come earlier, but he saw the team in February and was kind of like, no,
I'm away.
No, I'm okay. I'm away. I'm away.
Just wait till Insigne's there. I don't want to kind of lift this team up, right? But who wants to play with this group? Even though you know Insigne is coming, it's hard to bring players over when you don't have those star names to attract other players. It's just
that's a very, very good point, because somebody said on Twitter, you're about to see Bernardeschi become the best recruiter in the history of TFC, because, you know, he's so outspoken. He's doing all the interviews talking about, you know, all of his friends are making inquiries. One of the things that always drives me crazy when we start talking about the team, especially when we're in like such a public rebuild, is a lot of takes are like, well, you know, we'll be great. All we need is like 5 more midfielders, 2 CBs, a goalkeeper, 3 number 9s. And I'm like, well, that's not going to happen. And they all have to be in a single transfer window. And yet we're having a really informed conversation here. And I'm getting kind of the same vibes, which is like, you know, we're not really going to be world beaters or have any attempt at being a world beater until we cover this depth piece, until we cover that depth piece. It's not about the starting 11. So in a way, it's kind of a spin on the same language, which is this team needs work and we ain't there yet. Now, I'm not so worried about who fills in on the wings for Lorenzo and Bernardeschi when they go down, because there is nobody that can fill in for them on the wings, right? That's kind of the way it is. So you know, it's a JMR, it's a, you know, more in Schaffelberg situation, but there are guys on the team that can play on the wing, Jaden Nelson included. But I am worried about this midfield if we don't, you know, because I mean, we've just spent an hour talking about how much we've missed Marc-Anthony Kaye, and it's just the faint whisper of Marc-Anthony Kaye since we've only seen him play in a TFC shirt for a couple games. We're, you know, I have faith that we're going to change keepers over the offseason. I don't think that that's a problem. They're in their contract years. The question I wanted to roll around to is Chris Mavinga. People are saying that now that he's rounded into form, he's worth an extension, and I want honest answers. Do you think his time is done at TFC? Do you think we can do better? He's aged out of his prime, et cetera, ad infinitum.
So, Chris, you want to take that first?
I'll let you take it first, Mike, but I'm going to quickly just answer. I didn't get to the second part of Mike's question. Is a lot of people complain about Bob Bradley's pragmatism earlier in the season when he wasn't adapting tactics. And changing what he saw in order to grind out results. And I think that short-term pragmatism, or at least what I'd hope to see, is you think about the long term. Players need to get used to the formation you want to play. He played the 4-3-3 a lot. I know people don't like this, but there's muscle memory, there's understanding and developing that chemistry with players. They're not perfect pieces, but that's what he was trying to do, or at least that's what I think he was trying to do. And he wasn't trying to change that and alter it too much, because he understood there's a lot of kids that can only absorb so much. I'd rather get them set up to support Insigne and Bernardeschi and Criscito when they come, instead of getting them to just grind out results and play anti-football and low blocks for every
and develop bad habits such as Jesus Jimenez has, for example, and Iowa Canola. I completely agree with you 100%.
If you're listening to the podcast version, you can't see me shaking my head vigorously or nodding my head vigorously, because that's exactly what Chris Armas did, right? He's tried to put in a system. It didn't work. Then he tried to save his job by playing pragmatically, and then that didn't work. And that set us up down the road for a terrible 2021, right? So, I get it. There were a lot of sort of Bob Bradley. Does he know what he's doing? Is this the right hire? Yes, he's the right hire. It's not even close. We were all calling for this at the end of last year when we knew there was a chance that he could potentially be leaving LAFC. It made sense to bring him in. And you talk about a long build, and Jeff, we just have to look back to recent TFC history to show that patience pays off. Right?
Yep.
When we went into 2015, the team scored a lot of goals. It conceded a ton of goals. And slowly over the next couple of years, they inserted those pieces at center back, at midfield, the crowning piece being Victor Vasquez. That put you over the
100%.
So, yes,
100%.
Look, they may get to the playoffs this year, and I will call that a bit of a smokescreen season, as 2019 to me was a bit of a smokescreen season. Where you get to the playoffs and everybody's going to remember you made the playoffs. Great. But there's actually things that you need to continue to build on. And I think that's what we kind of missed out on in 2019. So just keep that in mind, guys. If the build is still coming, you're going to find MLS veterans that you can get as free agents to come into this team, and they can actually probably push you to that next level, right? You don't necessarily need to go out and get them all from Europe and spend ridiculous amount of TAM's money on these guys, right? So just keep that in mind.
And then hopefully what we see with Bob Bradley, which is most of my tactics articles, is that he learns over time. Once the system is there, once the muscle memory and kind of innate understanding of the system is there, we're going to shift to a bit more of that like pragmatism to grind out results when we have the lead or we're in a tight game. But I think, Jeff, for your other question on Mavinga, it's really tough to say. I don't think at least that we have another natural left-footed center back on the team. So if you like to build up the back, you typically like to have that balance of one right footer and one left footer.
Great point. Great point.
Yes, ideally, like I know Mavinga doesn't have the organizational skills that can kind of be that commanding presence at the back that's organizing everyone and being that final stopper that's communicating to everyone. Bradley usually takes a lot of that onus of kind of directing traffic and positioning people. Ideally, you want that further back too for your back line. Criscito is actually fulfilling that role, just FYI, as a left back. But if you can find someone else who's left-footed, commanding presence, organizer, not a DP salary, then by all means, like if they want to come to TFC, sign me up. But if you can't find anyone better and Mavinga is not going to require a DP salary, I think you can make the case for keeping Mavinga around on maybe a shorter term, like 2 to 3 year deal. It's hard to find left-footers. Like,
you're not, that's not wrong. You're 100% right.
Yeah. To me, it's all just comes down to how much, right? Like if the money's right, of course you can keep him. And whether he's a starter or it can again accept sometimes a depth role where he may not start every game because fitness has been an issue with him and injuries have been an issue with him.
Sure has.
If he can accept that he's going to have a bit of a rotational role within that sort of back four and the money's right. Yeah, of course. I think there's still value in him, and he can still give you great performances as you're starting to see down the stretch when he's playing with better players.
Absolutely. So just to wrap it up, because we've gone an hour, like nobody's business. We just burnt through it. We certainly have to have you back on, Chris, and everyone is saying it. So you definitely passed your Toronto Till I Die audition, as I knew you would. And your background game is unbelievable. Before we close out, no. Let's do your burning questions, Mike, and then I'll do my final.
Yeah. We'll just do these burning questions in from the audience this week. So Aziz, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, 5677 on Twitter just asked, how big is Wednesday's match against LA? If they don't pick up 3 points, is it game over for the playoffs? Gents, I'll start with you, Jeff. What do you think in terms of Wednesday's match?
Listen, the playoffs will be fun, but it's not like we're the Seattle Sounders, where if we miss the playoffs, it's the first time we've done it in the history of our time in MLS, right? We've missed the playoffs lots of times. So, it's 2 years in a row. It's not great. But considering the state of this team, considering this up and down season, it's nothing to me. So I see this Wednesday match against LA as a big one because of the people that are coming back to BMO after such a long time away. I'm talking about Victor Vasquez. I'm talking about Mark Delgado. I'm talking about Raheem Edwards, and I'm talking about the Greg father. Regardless of any hurt feelings, regardless of the, they deserve a hero's welcome. And I'm going to be really upset if I hear even one boo emanating from the crowd when they show up.
Even if it's for Eric Zavaleta?
No,
I noticed you.
I keep forgetting that Zavaleta's there, and I don't mean to do that. I don't mean to contribute to the Zavaleta hate train. They all deserve they all deserve their flowers. And I hope they get them, and I hope that there isn't any short-sighted people in the crowd that go the opposite direction, because I think it's entirely unfair. So playoffs are nice in terms of the actual, if they don't get the win, we have to win at least 5. Is that right, Chris? We have to take at least 5 3-pointers in remaining games to even have a snowball's chance in hell of making the playoffs. I believe I read that somewhere. So this is definitely one of them.
Yeah. I think what it is if we win 5 of the next 7, we have a 35% chance of finishing 7th, and it's still a 35% chance of finishing 6th. But if we win 6 of 6, we have a 48% chance of finishing 5th and a 30% chance of finishing.
Well, we've got one 6. Of those 7 because there's only 6 games left. So
yeah.
We've gotten off to a good start.
Yeah, we've gotten off to a good start. So yeah.
So Chris, what do you think?
It's a big game because if we only win 4 of our last 6, I think we only have a 22% chance of finishing 7th. So
that's bad.
If it's playoffs is your barometer, which I guess it is for most of us still, I think we can't afford to lose this game. It's also one of the few games we have at home. None of them are going to be easy.
No,
Montreal, Miami, LA Galaxy.
Yeah.
All of them, I think, are playoff teams, if last I checked. I don't know about the Galaxy.
Yes. Galaxy, yes, because they won last night.
Okay.
Yeah, they won. Yeah, so they're on the bubble, but they're higher up on the Western Conference.
They did us a solid beating New England last night. I'll jump this one up just because we're on the LA Galaxy train and talking about that match. This one's from me. How will you remember Greg Vanney as he makes his return to BMO Field on Wednesday night? So Chris, I'll start with you.
I honestly have to give it to Vanney for building our academy. I think before he came in, the actual infrastructure, just even having a defined system for them to learn in and building up kind of the coaching staff around it, the facilities, he kind of led us through a lot of that transformation. And without that, and I know not everyone likes Jaden Nelson, Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, and all the young kids that are coming through, but it's building a better base for us to build from in the future. We actually saw Ozo come to prominence under Vanney too, right? When he first came in 2013, 2012, he was nowhere. People saw him, they didn't think anything of him, but Vanney gave him that opportunity and kind of bled the way for other academy players in the future to become a part of the TSC first team. And if you're thinking about the MLS model as it currently is, you need your homegrown academy players to kind of fill that quota, but also to give you, it's interesting.
There we go. Photographer for WTR, Sean Pollock, comes in with a zinger. Galaxy have won 1 away game since May the 8th.
And that was
there
last
you
night.
Go. Yeah,
so, to answer your question, I think for me, it's the academy.
Fair enough. Jeff?
Scarves and trebles. And the fact that everybody that I know in the industry raves about what a personable human character he was, how nice he was, how willing he was to, stay around at scrums for hours on end and talk tactics and that sort of thing. He's the reason why it's been so difficult to take this downswing in TFC's fortunes, because we reached the mountaintop with him as the gaffer. So absolutely nothing.
My memories of him will always be Vanny Weiss, the time he came with the white linen suit on the sideline. And from then on, it was all about Vanny Weiss for me. We kind of covered this quite a bit in the second segment, so I don't think we need to spend any time. There was a question just about how concerned we should be about Marc-Anthony Kaye missing as many games. Clearly, we kind of answered the question of why.
Yeah, very concerned. He's the straw that stirs our drink, according to Chris Fung here. So very, very, very concerned.
But Jeff, you got a last piece here before we wrap up, so I wanted to let you take.
Okay, two questions. Do you think we're making the playoffs?
Ooh.
It's a loaded question to end the show on.
Okay. Go ahead, Chris.
No. I think the Montreal. My heart wants to say yes, but my head says no. How about that? That's kind of vague.
Yep, that's exactly how I feel.
I think we have the ability to. If Mac comes back, it goes probably to a yes. But if Ozo and Mac are both out for the next game, I think it's going to be tough. What we've started to see is a lot more of an emphasis on the Italians. So, future's murky.
Yeah, that's pretty tough. I've consistently said no, and I'm staying no. It's just
it'll hurt less.
That, and I just think the math is kind of against you a little bit. I think the need to rely on other teams and results goes against you a little bit as well. And look, Chris is right. The ability is there. The ability is 100% there.
That's not in question.
That's not in question. Yeah. I do think
it's just a matter of time and points.
Yes, but I also think that you're not necessarily facing the easiest teams down the stretch, and some of these teams do have things to play for themselves. So you are going to kind of get the best versions of these teams as you go down the road. And a lot of these teams are also very good in transition. Watching the LA Galaxy game last night, they got a lot of issues, but they scored some great transition goals.
They sure did. Very fair point.
And they sure did. The kind of goals that we give up in transition. So I just right now think the road is still really difficult. That doesn't mean I'm negative on the team, because I actually am very positive that they will still have a run into the end of the season, and that carries over into next season. Yes,
important. One was a point. I think it's still on free preview, but Molinaro's one-on-one interview with Greg Vanny on TFC Republic is an essential bit of reading. He's quite honest about. He's very proud that the kids got an extended run at the beginning half of the season, but he's pretty honest that, he's like, a lot of them weren't ready for those kind of minutes in MLS, and they may never be. But he was proud to see that happen. I'll end on this because it's come up like crazy. Hold on, I'm just reading the not pandering. Gotcha. Who would you spend? What kind of player would you spend TFC's remaining DP spot on?
This question comes up every single week, and it will keep coming up
400,000 times.
I think like 4 different ways.
So if Osorio leaves, central midfielder. If he
number 8, pure number 8.
If he doesn't leave, or for whatever reason Jimenez can't find his form for the rest of the year, that's a much more difficult answer, because you can go either way. Either your number 9, you can find someone who's not DP level that hopefully will produce better than Jesus, or you can find a midfielder who's not DP level that can maybe not produce at the same level as Osorio, but gives you very good value, and you don't need to spend a DP slot on them. So it's either central midfielder, striker. It really depends what goes on in the offseason and the rest of the way here.
So pure number 8 is what you would suggest to replace Osorio if he leaves.
Yes, because Bob Bradley, we know he wants to play that 4-3-3.
Gotcha. Mikey?
N'Golo Kanté. I've already answered this question. Cesc
Fabregas.
He's not Italian enough.
Yeah.
Just go get the midfielder that does everything. He's a free agent at the end of the season. Go for it. Why not? What do you got to lose? But in all seriousness, Chris answered what I was going to do.
Chris' answer is perfect. But
right, it's perfect. You either, if Oso stays, then you know what you can do with that DP. If he doesn't, then you're going to have to find somebody who can kind of fill that, whether it's with a DP spot or not, which is going to be really hard to do. But again, if you could go get N'Golo Kanté, go get the guy who can do everything, who can win the ball and progress the ball and can score goals for you as well.
Can he play on turf, and can he play 3 games a week in Miami Heat? That's something we got to worry about.
I would like to find out.
The thing that whenever I hear this question, I think back to a discussion we had on this show maybe a month ago, maybe less, which was when Berna and Jimenez were arguing over that penalty kick. And someone was saying, well, you know, Jimenez isn't getting that PK because he's not a DP. It occurs to me that when we have 2 DP wingers, we may be stuck in a situation where we can't get away with a non-DP striker just because the egos are too big and we got to have an equal ego at the front of the trident. Again, Chris's answer was perfect. I'm just spitballing here, but that's something that I consistently come up with when I'm asked this question, is that maybe we need that kind of, you know, because DPs are weird and MLS is weird with this DP tag. And we saw it when Bradley gave up his DP tag for the betterment of the club. He lost a bit of his weight in the locker room. He got it back, but he lost a bit of it. And I'm just wondering if, you know, we may be stuck into a DP number 9 because of our DP wingers. That's my take on the situation.
Fair. Yeah, like fair. Like.
All right, I am going to prepare for the queue up to the exit. Mike, why don't you take us out?
Absolutely.
Chris, it was such a pleasure, man. We got to have you back. This was unbelievable. This was a hell of a discussion.
Absolutely, Chris. Can we tell tell listeners where they can find you on all the socials and where you're writing?
They can find me on Waking the Red. I'm a writer there. Jeff would love for my actual work to be called Non-Fungible Tactics.
It should be
in the future.
It absolutely should be.
Go trademark it.
My Twitter handle is Non-Fungible Tact, so it's almost there. But that's all they would allow me to fit on my handle. One name to keep out for. I don't know if we'd sign him on a pre or in the winter. Would be someone like a Giacomo Bonaventura on Fiorentina. He's essentially.
I like that name.
So
that's a hell of a good name.
Just one to look out for because we know Bill Manning likes to go onto transfer market and look at upcoming free agents. So,
oh my goodness, if we sign him, you saw it here first. Everyone, TFC Live, you saw it here first.
There you go. All
that's
right,
where you can find me. And it was an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
Oh man, such
amazing.
Pleasure.
It's great to have you on. We'll be back next week with another Toronto Till I Die. Mike Singh will be back. Jeff, you will be back. So I think the three of us are back in the saddle again.
Three Musketeers.
So that's awesome. The Tunnel Club will also be back on Thursday after the LA Galaxy game. Myself and Sean will break action down. We'll both be in the South End for that one. It'll be my first live game. I haven't seen the Italians actually play live yet.
I know, it's weird.
I know. It's been a while.
Jet setter.
There. I know. But I will be there. We'll be back Thursday. And we'll also be back after the Montreal game, which is also coming up this weekend with a post gamer as well. As always, if you're listening to this on podcast, please like, subscribe, leave a review if you can. It helps us on the old algorithm and beat that old trap. That would be amazing. But for Jeffrey P. Nesker, for Chris Fung, my name is Mike Newell. Thanks for listening to Toronto Till I Die. We'll see you next week. Cheers, guys.
Cheers. And
wait, and baby, I'm TFC till I die.